Hello and welcome back to the Astrocast, our second of 3 special episodes where we fill in Dr. Wilko on what is what in Warhammer. That almost sounded professional. So, as always, I am Brad, and I am joined here tonight, as always, by
Theff
and Mataspore,
and special guest,
and Dr. Wilko. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, and Dr. Wilko. Sorry, we can take that again if you want.
No, we thrive on the crazy here.
As long as you mess up like this consistently over all 3 episodes, it's completely fine.
It's just like on How to Many Things, where the amount of silence between Mike saying, I'm Mike, and then me going, and Tom, is a running joke, because it's gone from about 1 second to maybe 5 at various points.
Dear God.
Hi, yes, I am Dr. Wilko of Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge Productions. I host this podcast by virtue of owning a website and offering to host it. And I also have some other podcasts, which we don't need to enumerate again. If you're on the website, you can find them. Yeah, so last time I asked you about 40k, because I've been 7 years in the wilderness, away from the world of
Turned from the light of the Emperor.
Yes, I had turned from the light of the Emperor, playing a lot of D&D mostly, I guess. But now that I'm kind of accidentally falling back into it, and I must stress that unlike with the Indomitus box, I have not yet bought Dominion. But fantasy, I'll just give you a potted summary again of where my place with the fantasy was. I was actually really surprised. I found a load of old stuff that I was sharing with Brad the other day, including like hilarious artwork I did when I was 12 for the Warhammer club that I ran at school. And I hadn't realised, I got into High Elves. It must have been about 1.5 years into me getting into Games Workshop stuff in general. I thought it took me a lot longer to get into fantasy, because fantasy was always, like 40k was the thing that felt like it was designed to appeal to teenage boys, which I was. And then fantasy felt like the adult game. It had more rules. You had to care about which way your units were pointing and things like this. It was more chess-like, I would say, even though when I started to learn to play it, I was disavowed of all these ideas that I had about it being much harder. And a lot of the core mechanics are very similar, it turns out.
Yeah.
Except you can't measure everything because of guess weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I was just really into the stuff. All of my hobby money, all of my pocket money went on hobby stuff when I was that age. So I had High Elves, I had Empire, and I had Lizard Men, I think, were my core armies. The High Elves petered out quite quickly. Like when I started collecting High Elves, it was back when the models were a single piece. Like all the archers were identical, all the spearmen were identical at the start of 6th edition, before they released all the kind of newer stuff. And then Lizard Men must have been the 6th edition codex. I got into them, so they had some new stuff. And I know they've got cool codexes, army book. And then I also got into Empire. I think I got into Empire by the time 7th edition was out, because I got a bucket load of Empire off an old school friend, and I was slowly painting up a Nuln army, but I never really got anywhere with it. And I sold off like 4,000 points of the stuff 7 years ago. But I suppose my big first question is, they finally did it. The Maniacs, they blew it up.
Yes, they did.
What happened? Like, essentially, I'm aware of the basic concept. They finally ended the old world.
They did.
But it seems to me like fantasy became very 40k-like with round bases and things like that. And so I suppose the first question is, lore-wise, what happened? Because I think I mentioned in the last episode, there was an Eye of Terror campaign for 40k. Similarly, I remember playing I can't remember what it was called now, but it was a Chaos campaign.
Yes.
Storm of Chaos. I remember Storm of Chaos, and at the end, Archon, big Chaos dude with a big sword on a cool horse, looking like Napoleon. That model is based on that famous painting of Napoleon, turned up and failed to destroy the old world, is how the lore went, because we fought him off or whatever.
No,
and
Grimnir Ironhide fought him off.
That was not quite correct. Oh, okay, well.
Basically, the Emperor, Storm of Chaos, sorry, slight segue, because Storm of Chaos actually has nothing to do with why the Warhammer world, I mean, Archaon was there, I suppose, when it blew up, but it wasn't the whole Storm of Chaos thing.
I think the point I wanted to make was there was another chance for the lore to move on, and it didn't.
It did kind of.
I was trying to draw that parallel.
I believe. No, the Storm of Chaos was an event that happened in the lore, but then, because then you have like the Nemesis Crown, which was a weird thing that didn't really happen.
A whole lot of very strange stuff happened.
Like, lore happened, but the game kind of felt stagnant. As someone who was playing at the time.
I know what you mean.
And I didn't have a problem with that, but because I didn't have to buy a load of new models. But
things may shift around a little, but the status quo remains the same.
So what actually happened?
What happened is summarized quite well in the quote that you said at the beginning, that they blew it up. You remember that whole magic sink thing that the High Elves had on their island to stop the Chaos Wastes from basically eating the world? Do you remember that?
I do vaguely remember that. Yes. Because the High Elves had this cool island. Yeah, they had a big hole in the middle.
Yes.
And it probably involved Teclis.
No, it was Kalendor Dragon Tamer.
Yeah, it was Kalendor, yeah. Teclis didn't really have much to do with it.
Oh, okay.
For one thing, Teclis was not a stone statue surrounding the thing. But yeah, that all got that got kind of completely disrupted, and a load of plans of several factions came to a head. By Teclis, yes. A load of plans of several factions came to a head at once. And chaos was just about to swallow the entire planet, and then said planet exploded. And the souls of...
But why did it explode?
Oh, God.
In like 2 sentences. If that's possible.
Everyone and everything fucked up, and there was too much magic at once. There you go.
Teclis has a new idea of how to control magic, and he basically creates... what are they called? Is it the Incarnates? He tries to bind the winds of magic to an individual. So Karl Franz, Emperor of the Empire, is killed. He dies and then is reincarnated as Sigmar. So Sigmar returns to the old world in the body of Karl Franz and is then merged with the winds of Azir and becomes the incarnate of the heavens. And this happens with various other things. I don't know too... for someone who plays Empire, I don't really know...
He brings back Nagash and he gets Sheesh.
So no, Nagash is brought back by Arkan the Black. So there was a series of books called The End Times. And each of these End Time books had a central character who they were about. So there was End Times Nagash, which was the first one, where I believe Arkan the Black kidnaps the Fey Enchantress, the Ever Queen's daughter, and someone else, and they are all sacrificed to bring back Nagash. And Nagash rises from his Black Pyramid in his big, really impressive model form. We then go on to... I don't know what order they're in. That's the problem.
It doesn't matter.
You then have one which is like the Nurgle come over and pretty much trash the Empire. Belfazar Gult initially tries to stop all this by building a massive, great big magical wall with Manfred von Karstein. Von Karstein betrays them. Most of the Empire is trashed beyond repair. We then jump over to the High Elves in Ulthuan, and they are invaded by the Dark Elves. It then turns out that all of the Phoenix Kings from from the second Phoenix Atonement were fake and had been magicked through the Flame of Vizier, Azumon? I can't remember. I think it's Azumon. By magic bullshit.
Yeah.
That's it.
Malekith was the true Phoenix King all along.
So there's a massive civil war within both the Dark Elves and the High Elves, with Tyrion taking Widowmaker, the Sword of Cain, and basically becoming the new leader of the Dark Elves, but also has High Elves on his side. And then you've got those High Elves who are like, I don't like him, but Malekith, he is Phoenix King. Big battle. Teclis fucks up and thinks, I know better than anyone else. I will bind the winds of magic to, his plan was to try and bind the Wind of Fire to Malekith, so he would be like a true Phoenix King. That goes wrong, and I don't know who gets bound to the Wind of Fire. I believe it's a dwarf.
Probably.
But
Grugni or Grimnir, I can't remember.
Probably Grimnir.
Okay.
No, Grugni becomes
Grimnir, yeah, you're right, Grimnir, yeah.
Ulthuan sinks. The survivors then squat over in Athal Loren, and essentially all of the elven factions are one cohesive mass. More shenanigans happen, and the world goes bang.
Can I jump in here with the explanation I wrote in the Path to Glory WhatsApp chat to bring everyone up to speed for Age of Sigmar?
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Okay, so the old world got blowed up. This upset a lot of people, but it's canon, so we can't go back. Big Dragon Bro, whose job it is to reboot reality every so often, finds Sigmar clinging to the core of the old world, and they high-five, creating a new set of mortal realms out of the old winds of magic. So 8 realms, each one based around an old wind: death, life, metal, heavens, etc. Life is good, the gods get shit done, people are happy. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation, Chaos, attacked. Sigmar gets sad, pacts with the other gods fail, and he retreats to the celestial city of Azerheim in the realm of heavens, closing himself off and sulking. Then lightning strikes, literally, and he has an idea. Space Marines. No, sorry, bad Theff. Stormcast Eternals. They are chonky boys who ride lightning to the battlefield, and order starts to return. Yay!
I've been recently reading the AoS free book, so I've actually now read this. So Sigmar is hurled through the universe on the ball of the core of Malice, the old world. He gets saved by this dragon, and then Rakothian, and then he explores the mortal realms, and he finds other survivors from the world that was. So in the realm of life, he finds Alariel, who was the former Everqueen. He finds Tyrion and Teclis, who are now the twin gods of light. He finds Malarion in the realm of shadows. He finds Gorkamorka in the realm of beasts. He finds Grimni and Grunni, who are fire and metal, respectively. I think I'm almost there. He's heavens. So he then finds the Khan of Nagash and raises Nagash as the new god of death, and forms a lovely order. The Justice League of the Mortal Realms, the Pantheon of Order. Then chaos, as he said, happens. There's a big battle at the Battle of the Burning Skies, where he tries to kill Archaon, because Archaon survives because he is the herald of the apocalypse. Throws Galmaraz at Archaon. Unfortunately, it was a trick, and the hammer is lost, and then he runs off to Azir, shutting all the realm gates, which is how you get between the different realms, to Azir. And then chaos goes everywhere. How did I do, Mataspore?
You did pretty good. No, you pretty much got it right up until the point that Sigmar basically went into the wind of the heavens and shut the door, and didn't come out for a long time.
I can't remember if it's thousands or hundreds of years, but he basically has a bit of retrospection and kind of goes, actually, the reason we lost was because I lost my temper. I threw Galmaraz. I failed. So he then stops being the son of war and becomes he stops being the champion of mankind, which is what he viewed himself before, and to be the father of mankind, and takes a step back. And with Grunni, who is the metal god, basically, the dwarf metal god, looks at the way, basically he says that mortals cannot beat chaos on their own. They need someone stronger. They need a purer spirit to beat them. So he takes the metal from Malice, the ball of the old world, the core of the old world, to forge new armor and weapons to clothe his warriors. He looks out across the mortal realms, and he looks for heroes. Anyone who's standing up to the darkness. It could be a heroic knight leading a last stand against a chaos warband, or it could be a little old grandmother trying to defend her family with a rolling pin. He sees these people, shoots down lightning, pulls them up to Azir, and then reforges them on the anvil of apotheosis, reforges their spirit on the anvil of apotheosis, merging their soul with a bit of his celestial energy, and that's Stormcast Eternals. They are kind of Space Marines, but probably a better take on the super soldier concept, I would say. Canonically, they can be male, female, they can be anyone, they can come from anyone. All it acts is that act of standing up against the darkness. That is what makes a Stormcast Eternal.
And basically, Sigmar builds up this army for a very long time. And then when he deems the time is right, when in all the other winds of magic, chaos basically reigns supreme at this point, he throws open the gates of the heavens, his armies pour forth, and you get what I'd wanted to see in 40k for absolutely ages, because chaos actually gets pushed back, like legitimately pushed back.
So first of all, he takes the key realm gates and secures those, so he's got transport between the realms, and then he starts looking for the other gods, because none of the gods were killed when chaos fell. They're all just kind of hiding.
Some of them are willing to work with him again.
It's so Alariel takes some convincing, I believe.
Yeah, and she's still not fully on board either way. I think it might be a good point to make at this point that Age of Sigmar embraces that thing that Games Workshop were allergic to for a very long time, and has a continuously moving plotline. Like each edition, each game set in that universe has advanced the story somehow, and it's
something
great.
else is going on. It is really cool. I think first edition was Sigmar throwing open the whole thing, wasn't it? And bringing it all. And then second edition was that Nagash trying to be a naughty boy, and Alariel kind of woke up.
Yeah. So first edition ends with essentially pretty much a victory for the forces of order, because they established the cities of Sigmar, these bastions of hope against the darkness, these really strong cities which surround key realm gates between the world. Then
and then the whole darkness kind of starts creeping back, as it is wont to do. Because I know Nagash is very pissed off with Sigmar at this point, so he starts work on the next version of the Black Pyramid, the Black Pyramid 2.0.
I think it's probably 4.6 by this point.
Yeah, 2.0, 4.6. I don't know. The newest version.
He's made too many Black Pyramids.
He has made too many Black Pyramids. But shut up. This one is the biggest one, therefore the best. So, it's basically made out of the grave sand of Sheesh, which you can form it into realmstone and stuff. And he makes a gigantic Black Pyramid because, I don't know, he's following the Abaddon school of thought. It will work eventually. And yeah, he starts a great big ritual which will kill absolutely everyone, and then he will rule over the corpses. You know, the exact same as the first plan, except on a much bigger scale. And just as with the first plan, the Skaven completely fuck it up. Which is, that's why I love the Skaven so much. They're indirectly or directly responsible for everything going wrong.
It's basically theft and graffiti that screw it all up.
Yeah, it's right. Essentially, the very first time Nagash tried this in the old world, the Skaven realized that everyone was going to die, briefly unified, made that horrible sword, pressed it on the last true king of Nagash, the old, Tomb King's empire, Nagashazar or something like that. It drove him. They made the fell blade. They gave it to the human king, shoved him into the ritual chamber. He killed Nagash. Basically, Nagash started the ritual. The Skaven panicked, tried to smuggle in a load of high-rank clan-Eshin assassins. They failed completely, but the presence of living things inside Nagash's Black Pyramid at the culmination of the ritual threw everything completely off.
Plus, in the third edition rulebook, I've just read this paragraph. They see, but what some of the so there's the Black Pyramid, but it's decorated with warpstone, and the Skaven go, "Ooh, shiny!"
Yeah,
and they go, "Do you know what would be really funny if we drew a penis over those carvings?" And they did some graffiti on over the top of the runes.
They basically they mark it with all the different clans' symbols, so when they send the slaves, they know which ones to take, which of course completely disrupts all the lovely markings that Nagash made. So yeah, basically, rather than a big sweeping wind of death killing everyone and resurrecting them as mindless thralls to Nagash, you get the Necroquake, which still sends a load of death energy out through all the winds, but it doesn't kill anyone. It just causes all the people who'd already died there to stand back up, and crucially, most of them are not under Nagash's control, which is a problem.
And probably the worst thing that happens is it damages the Anvil of Apotheosis.
Yes.
Yeah.
So So one of the nice things with Stormcast is, so when a Stormcast is killed in battle, they don't die. They explode into lightning and shoot back to Azir, and they are reforged. Now, this is one of the nice things they've done. They've gone for when they come back, they're not the same. Every time a Stormcast is reforged, they lose a bit of themselves.
Yeah, they're a bit more mechanical.
Nagash steals a little sliver of their soul and takes it for himself, so they lose a bit of their humanity.
And they also become more extreme. So they're organized into storm hosts, and each storm host has a particular temperament. So, but the problem is they've kind of gone from there's one which was the most righteous souls, the truest believers in Sigmar. They are becoming more and more zealous in their belief and brutal in their zealotry, which I think is quite a nice thing. It's yes, the Stormcast can keep coming back, but they don't come back the same, and they can actually now properly die as of AoS 3. There is ways of killing them.
Yes, hence the new armor for them that rescues the new Primaris Stormcast.
I did see Brad share a photo from that as they have Primarchs now.
Yeah, that's the Lord Commander the Hammers of Sigmar, who are the poster boys of the Stormcast and of AoS, I suppose. It's therefore no surprising that when I paint my Dominion Stormcast, they are probably going to be Hammers of Sigmar. I quite like gold and blue. I can't help it.
Oh, it's a good colour scheme. Why. It is a really good colour scheme. Yeah, and then you get 3rd edition, which had that lovely picture of like Yndrasta against that big nasty ball of chaos thing.
Looking forward to painting her. She is so cool.
Yeah.
She
does model. Look very, very cool.
And also, so within the lore, what's now happening is, so what happened when Sigmar fell back, he did take some of his armies with him, and the descendants of those are trying to reclaim their land. So they're now sending out what are called the Dawnbringer Crusades. So they're being launched from the cities of Sigmar to retake areas that were once a city of order, or have cross ley lines of the realms. And they are doing this using floating cities. And I really like this as a concept. So each of these Dawnbringer Crusades are based around a methalith, which is maybe not a floating city, but it's a large floating rock, which is being pulled across by various different, depending on where they are. So some of them have been retrofitted with Caradron Overlord, the Sky Dwarfs like engines, and are flown. Some of them are literally pulled by pack mules. Others are being pulled by hordes of flagellants, but they come along and these are stuffed full of prefabricated buildings and all sorts of equipment to basically drop down, build a city as quickly as possible and fortify it. And then they can either leave the methalith floating in the air as a watchtower, or they drop it down as like a keep. And that's kind of where we are, as far as I'm aware, with the lore. But as Mataspore is more of the Mataspore and Theff are more of the experts in the AoS lore.
There is also that whole thing happening in the realm of beasts, and Kragnos waking up. So that's looking to be the next big thing. It's but basically it's kind of going. It's nice. I like it because there's the 4 main kind of factions in AoS, isn't there? There's Order, Chaos, Death, and Destruction.
So I suppose that, like, I've seen that on the website, obviously, when looking at shiny models that I can't afford just now. This hobby, we love it so. But yeah, I saw that and I wondered, like, I mean, like, Order makes sense, but like the fact that there were 4 seemed like didn't immediately, like, there's generally you kind of split these things into good versus bad, right? So the fact there were 4 kind of intrigued me. And is there a particular lore reason for those 4, or is it just they sounded reasonable?
Order is basically Sigmar and his heavy quotation marks allies. Chaos is chaos. Chaos is the quartet. Well, the
plus Skaven.
The quartet with the horned rat being one of the quartet. No, it's basically the Chaos Gods plus the horned rat. Slanesh was kind of sealed away for a little while, but Morothy fucked that up through being Morothy.
Yeah.
So it's basically the Chaos Gods and Skaven. Destruction is probably the kind of least well defined, but it's basically the ones who just want to smash stuff. So it's the orcs, the giants, the ogres, all that kind of might makes right, that kind of thing. And then you've got Death, which is, well, Nagash and everything that kind of came from him. Zombie. If you use zombies in your army, you're one of them. They're basically just 4 fairly simple ways to divide the things, and it's nice that no one's. I guess if you're going to have a good guy, it would be Order, but even in Order, it's not that clear.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, which is quite nice. I like it, and like I was saying before, I like that each edition almost has kind of had their turn. Because first edition it started with chaos, and then Order kind of came sweeping back in. Second edition was all about death or what death was trying to do, and now it's 3rd edition, and it's looking very much like Destruction's going to have their turn, which is going to be fun. Because orcs and goblins are always fun. I don't play them, but I love
orcs and goblins. Have always been fun. Yeah. If I was to pick the two fun armies, like if you were going for fun from traditional Warhammer fantasy battles, I would have picked the 2 armies I would have picked would have been Skaven and orcs and goblins, because they are the most chaotic. Things can go wrong. Yeah,
that's why I play Skaven. they're still fun even now. But,
it also helps from a gameplay standpoint that people with collections of miniatures from Old Fantasy, certainly in first edition, you could play the suit of what you had left over. So, for example, I had a bunch of lizard men from Old Fantasy and a few like random other models, and I could throw them together as an order army and play them in Age of Sigmar just as a way to get into it without having to worry too much about like rules restrictions, that kind of thing. And that helped ease people into it, I think.
I think you can't overstate, but the transition between Old Fantasy and Age of Sigmar was rough as balls. They kind of dropped the ball in a lot of ways. Include not having points value to start with. It was just kind of throw on stuff that is, fair.
I remember hearing about that, and I remember being like, oh, I'm kind of glad I'm not playing anymore because it sounds like it all got messed up. And I appreciate that, like, looking back on it, I mean, I didn't have the information because I wasn't playing it. And I think as an outsider, I got there was a very vocal group of people who didn't like the changes. It sounded weird as an outsider who wasn't currently playing at the time. And now it's kind of got good, maybe, was kind of the understanding of it from the outside. So.
If you want a good, well, I don't know about good, but if you want a little summation of the whole feelings of the transfer from Old Fantasy to AoS, just look at the last the last episode that we did. I went on a slight tirade,
slight rant, yeah.
About all of that, but yeah, essentially there was a lot of I won't say butt hurt this time. There was a lot of hurt feelings when they did that.
I mean, I can understand when you've invested a lot of money, a lot of time into a thing and it changes, people are annoyed. Like this happens in all of these types of hobbies at various points. It's happened with D&D. You've bought all of the 3.5 books. They bring out 4th edition, which was designed to bring in new people. And again, there are similar parallels, I suppose. It happens every now and again, but I think generally it seems like if you let the dust settle, that the communities get better when you force them through these changes. Like, at least my impression is you lose a few kind of people who get annoyed by it, but you generally gain more people by making a game open, if you know what I mean.
Oh, definitely. That's the thing. The example I used in the previous episode was he's a lot older now, but when AoS first came out, one of my cousins, like 8, and because I'd been talking about Warhammer around him, he decided he wanted to get into it. So his dad bought him a very basic, like just a pack of Stormcast, basically. Can't remember exactly which one, but he put them together. It gave him a better paint job than I'm probably capable of doing because I suck at painting. And the thing is, I then played a game with my 8-year-old cousin, and aside from a very brief explanation of how it all worked at the start, he was fine. I don't think I could have done that with an Old Fantasy thing.
No, I can imagine not. Yeah, like as someone who was getting into it, and I wasn't 8, obviously. 6th edition was more of an ask, especially all of the magic stuff over like compared to psychic powers, which were really simple in 40k at the time. They're arguably more powerful than they are now, I think, possibly.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Vortex of Doom. Sorry, we don't talk about the darkness.
There's been a lot of lore chat, and I suppose I was less into the fantasy lore than I was into the 40k lore, partly because I'd argue there's less of it out there, but I think it was also, I feel like fantasy was the game where me and my friends had more of our own kind of narrative, whereas in 40k, we were really into the lore. And I'm more of a sci-fi person than I am a fantasy person. That's always been true. I think that's just, when it comes to reading things, that's where I lie. But I love the fantasy models, and I do love elves and all of that stuff. But I was trying to, I suppose my question now is, like, 3rd edition is just coming out. I understand that, so we may not have a formed opinion on that. But what's it, now that the game has settled and we don't have these problems with no points values and things like that, what is the game like? Is it 40k but with just fantasy models, or is it a completely different beast? I honestly have no idea what Age of Sigmar is like.
It's the best bits of kind of 8th/9th 40k, but with its own flavour. It's still got that kind of fun silliness, but in a very tight, well-designed game. Like, it plays very fast, it plays quite dirty, and if you know what you're doing, you can crack out a game very quickly. They've just upped all the points values, so the focus is shifting towards smaller, more intimate games. if I can use that term in this setting.
More skirmishy?
Yeah,
maybe?
it feels like an up-jumped skirmish game, but in the very best way possible. Like, your dudes are your dudes, they are fun, they hit hard, games don't last that long, but there's a good amount of tactical depth if you're willing to find it.
Yeah. I think that is a very big selling point, that the games don't last that long. I think I remember back when me and Dark Mouse had that very first game, and yeah, I think the overall sentiment at the end of it was freaking brutal, because like most of our armies were gone on both sides, and it only lasted like 3 or 4 turns, fast turns at that. So
wow, okay. Because I think that's the thing that interests, like, old fantasy stood there as the big tactic game that, like I say, it had this kind of impression of it was the adult version of 40k in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that there weren't adults playing 40k, but I definitely got the impression like 40k was that on-ramp for the hobby, and Warhammer was there for someone who wanted the tactical depth, the nuance of all this positioning of units and stuff like that. And a charge from the rear at the right time would completely destroy you. And that's why the Total War version of Warhammer works so well, because they already had those kind of mechanics in there. And then, so it's interesting to me, like, when you say it's got a bit of tactical depth, would you say it's equivalent now between 40k and fantasy, or do you still feel like Age of Sigmar can be more tactical?
I think Age of Sigmar is almost, as you said, the on-ramp. Age of Sigmar has taken up that mantle in many ways. Age of Sigmar has some very easy gateways to it as well, like, for example, Warhammer Underworlds and Warcry, where you can get units that you can then build up into armies quite quickly. It's more about the placement of models, I'd say, and area of effect, abilities, that kind of thing. Much like 40k these days, but those matter a lot, like, where you are and where you cast the endless spell that will move across the board and eat things as it goes, matter a lot. And the more you get into it, you can play a really tight meta with Age of Sigmar, but it's also so accessible that I'd almost argue new players in the hobby should get into that before 40k.
Okay, that's interesting, because that seems like a big shift.
As I said, the one thing that I think that's probably pushed me now to get into Age of Sigmar, and we didn't really mention in our 40k episode, was so we've mentioned Path to Glory a few times, and that's the system that's made me go, I now want to get into Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
What is that? Because I don't know.
Okay.
So it's their new. I'll let Theff explain.
Okay, Path to Glory. Brief overview is an empire-building campaign system for Age of Sigmar. So the idea is, as you play games, you capture territories which give you enhancements, which allow you to upgrade your stronghold, which allow you to take more units, which then allows you to play those units in the games, which, rinse, repeat. But it also has mechanics for things like your units take casualties. And you might find that if a unit took a lot of casualties, you don't have as many models in that unit for the next game. And it's an in-depth RPG without being too heavy on the RPG elements, but allows you to feel like you're actually progressing.
So it's interesting. I have 2 points I want to raise here. One is, I messaged Brad after I read the 9th edition 40k book, and I don't want to spend too much time on 40k, as we've already done an episode on that, but I looked at the Crusade rules and went, ooh, you intrigue me. And that sounds very similar, not identical, but like the same concept. Ooh, and like you said in that episode, that it seems like Age of Sigmar is taking the lead, and then 40k is picking some of these things and iterating on them a bit.
I think they're more willing to experiment with Age of Sigmar. I think there's a certain, and to be fair, 40k is still the cash cow. It's still the big seller. So, but Age of Sigmar is still coming up massively and definitely sells better than Old Fantasy did. But they're more willing to play around.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing that slightly reminds me of is, I remember, so I mentioned briefly I was helping run a 40k, a Warhammer club, we called it, at school. And we did mostly fantasy and 40k, and we did a bit of Lord of the Rings, and we also did a tiny bit of Blood Bowl, because the teacher liked Blood Bowl. So we, at some point, nearly every one of us had tried Blood Bowl, because he brought in fully painted, like, forces. And the thing I remember really getting into, and I can understand why that would extend to it, is they released Lord of the Rings. It wasn't called Battle Companies, I don't think, when it was Lord of the Rings, but we got really into that. I actually have some photos, I can throw them in the show notes, of my Lord of the Rings models that still have their names painted on them, because they were all individual people who I tracked. And I had a Gondorian force, and I found them all. And in fact, the leader of that army is a name I invented by like smashing Boromir and something from the Tolkien mythos together. And I've used that in like video games since. It's like my go-to like character name. And that I really enjoyed. I love like the fate points, and your characters died, but they didn't actually die. You had them in the next mission. And the Crusade stuff seems a lot like that. And this also sounds a lot like that. So that really intrigues me.
I would say the path to glory is that they saw the success with Crusade. And there's some really cool stuff you can do with Crusade. Like, I actually want to get a Space Marine character killed so I can put them in a Dreadnought, because that is just something you can do.
Yeah.
It's great because that fits in the lore. So what with Crusades, you've got the territory system, which is really nice. And it's the casualty mechanic. So what happens with that is, so say you have 20 clan rats and 10 of them die. You then have to roll a dice for each one that died, and on a 1, that model is permanently dead. So if you take the same unit of clan rats in the next game, you could only take a maximum of 18 because those two are dead. Now you can pay glory points to refresh the unit and like recruit it. But you've got to roll to see if you get recruits.
You can recuperate or reinforce, basically. If you recuperate, you roll for each model you've lost, and you might get them back. If you reinforce, you just add a set number of models to the unit. But you can only reinforce a certain amount of units in your army, so yeah.
So it's a system I'm really looking forward to sitting for our Path to Glory campaign, because I think that is going to be a lot of fun. Even if it will.
That does sound fun. To the point where I'm sitting here going, do you have space?
Yeah,
yes.
We can talk about this offline, but yeah.
I can add you to the WhatsApp. I am now an admin.
Okay.
Oh no.
Unlimited power.
I have all of the power.
That would be cool. I do like the sound of Aegis. As I said, I haven't bought the Dominion box because I think Seraphon, which is the new name for Lizardmen, would be my army of choice, because I do like them, and possibly some elves. Who knows? I do like the shiny world elves they had at one point, but I haven't looked into the stuff other than seeing that there's some really, really, really big models now, which you didn't really have before. Like the kind of standout £60 character model kind of things are awesome looking, but also, I mean, they're amazingly detailed. They look great. They always have all the things that Citadel ticks off. But it was also more of an investment than buying like a small box of like 5 dudes or whatever. So yeah, I've seen those and gone,
What I'd recommend is find the faction you want and then buy the Start Collecting box for it, because those are stupidly good value, like really good value. Like the Sylvaneth one, for example, it's normally 40 quid for a Tree Lord on his own. If you buy the Sylvaneth box set, it's 55 quid for the Tree Lord, so that's already 40 quid, a £20 character model, and a £35 set of Dryads. So get the Start Collecting box. It's worth it.
Especially if you go through third parties, so Goblin, Element, those ones where you get an extra 20% off, they become ridiculous. There are some of them where the big thing is basically free.
Yeah.
In inverted commas.
None of this hobby is free.
I terrified myself for a moment because I clicked on that, and for some reason it auto-detected me as in Australia, and it said $180, and I was like, oh no.
That's
£55. Oh, that's much more reasonable. Because I remember the old £50 box sets that were like a complete 1,000-point force. So you get less models nowadays, but the idea that you can buy a £50, still roughly a £50 box set and get into it, because like the 40k ones are 80 odd, I think. So that's cool.
What's nice with both the patrols and the Start Collecting is they're now both legal forces. The old 40k Start Collecting range, which is slowly being replaced, they weren't all legal armies, or they didn't work, and they weren't all the same points value. Whereas now all of the patrols, the £85 patrol boxes, are approximately 500 points, and they are all playable out of the box. That you don't need to buy anything else to them. You have at least a HQ, at least a troop, and enough to get you up to 500 points. With the Start Collecting, they roughly come to about 600 points each, which totally by coincidence happens to be the lowest level of Path to Glory. Someone had a bright idea at that moment.
Yes, it would seem so. Okay, well, I will. We can have more offline discussions via WhatsApp. But yes, let's say I'm definitely intrigued by the idea of doing something like that. The one last question I had, because I appreciate we've maybe gone on a bit longer on this than we'd intended, was so I put Oldhammer ? Into that, because as I alluded to in the first episode about 40k, the reason I've kind of got the bug again is I went and played Oldhammer, i.e. 6th edition fantasy with Brad in a lovely summery garden. It was a very nice day. I think I caught the sun a bit, actually, even with the sun cream. That was a great day. Enjoyed that. And I was like, oh, I like this. And, it was like a traditional small fantasy game. It took like 3 hours or whatever, but it was enjoyable. But then it may have been less than that.
I think it was
did a lot of like
probably
rules.
an hour and a half. And that was a lot of us going to Callum and Joe. How does this work again? Where is this in the book?
Me realizing that somewhere in the back of my brain was still the wounding chart and the strength toughness chart.
Yeah.
So Brad was rolling dice, and I was going, that failed, that hit, and Brad was like, "How do you know this?" And I was like, "It's in here." It's like muscle memory.
I checked it. It's like every time he was right.
I do love how that's all been simplified in like 9th ed and stuff for 40k. I obviously haven't read 3rd ed Age of Sigmar.
It's equally simplified.
I would have guessed so. But yeah, so I put Oldhammer in here as a question mark. I didn't mean that kind of Oldhammer, because while I'd happily play that, if I'm not going to go base a load of stuff on square bases and get all that old... And the sheer number of models you had to get was a lot as well, especially considering the prices right now. But I know that there are allusions to a thing happening that would be set in the old world. I suppose this is your chance to kind of rumour mill or theory craft a bit more than you have done. I know you've mentioned it a bit in previous episodes. But
so yeah, you quite correctly, they've alluded to the old world, which is their return to the Warhammer Fantasy realm. Probably the biggest single thing is the Total War games. They have massively, between them and Vermintide, have massively re-raised the profile of fantasy. Now, what is it going to be? We don't know. They have kind of played that very close to their chest. I could probably make a good guess about when it's going to be set. It's looking like it's going to be set in the year 2200 of the Imperial calendar onward, based on stuff they've shown off, like who is the King of Bretonnia at that time. And will probably lead up to the Great War against Chaos with Magnus the Pious versus the Ever-Chosen at that time, who is not lucky. Besides that, we don't know. I mean, there's lots of debate whether it's going to be a rebirth of old fantasy, whether it's going to be War Master. We don't know is the obvious answer. I would say, and there was a Facebook chat screenshots going around earlier that seemed to confirm that it's going to be standard size for Games Workshop, which I went, yeah, that makes sense. It's going to be it's going to use the same scale as the Age of Sigmar minis, but on square bases, but square bases that match the rounds. So the example they used was Chaos Warriors used to be on 25mm squares. 25mm squares. They're now on 32mm rounds. The idea is they will be on 30mm squares, and there will be some way of handling round bases and square bases. But that was a bit of pinch of salt, and to me that makes a lot of sense. I think it will be. I don't think they'll be asking Skaven players to rebase 100 clan rats that they rebased onto rounds onto squares. I think we'll get like the War of the Ring, because War of the Ring came out probably 15 years ago, and it was a large battle system for Lord of the Rings. Now, Lord of the Rings was on round bases.
I remember that, yeah.
And they sold square movement trays with round holes. And that is...
Oh, yes.
That is the system. If I was going to go and put money on at the bookies, that would be the system I think we're going to come back to.
I'll also mention here that Apocalypse, when it was re-released, had movement trays designed for large squads of 40k models that brought them into ranks to allow for damage, that kind of thing. So we have precedent of a fairly recent 40k game, or Games Workshop title even, that did that.
But as to when it's going to be released, they announced it 2019, and they said it was several years off. Now, there is a theory that so we've alluded to in the previous episode, Horus Heresy 2. There was an idea that was supposed to come out in 2020. Now, the global pandemic has naturally caused quite a lot of kerfuffle around the world. So we think that that's now kicked Horus Heresy back at least a year, maybe 2. So I would expect to see the old world probably 2 to 3 years out from now. I did have the idea we might see it first quarter next year, because Games Workshop likes to put a big release in March, April time for their end of year statement. They like to have a big thing that gets a lot of revenue in for the end of the tax year. If you look back through, Curse City came out around then. I believe Blackstone Fortress did the same. They like to have a big release in March, April. which is nice because it tends to coincide with my birthday. So, I will keep an eye out, and we'll definitely cover stuff going forward with the old world. But at the moment, it's very much don't know. Hopefully, that's answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's because when we discussed this when we were playing Oldhammer the other day, that was kind of the thing that I was like, ooh, I like that idea. Now that you've explained Age of Sigmar to me, I'm more on board. It was more that I didn't know what Age of Sigmar was, and I didn't want to just play 40k with fantasy models. Now that I have this idea of maybe doing Path to Glory, yeah, you've accidentally made another sale for Games Workshop, but that's fine.
Join us.
Accidentally? Yes, accidentally, right, sure.
If someone from Goblin or Element is listening to this, I will quite happily shill for you. Just give me the plastic crack. So I think on that prostituting myself on that
bombshell,
I think it's time to end this one because we still have one more special to do. Let's do this.
We do. Right, God.
With that, it's good night from me.
And me.
And me.
And good night from me. Good evening and welcome to the bar. Join Dr. Wilko as he investigates the histories of your favourite spirits and your favourite cocktails while mixing you a drink at the bar. The other bars may be closed, but a podcast bar will always remain open.